Solutions. Learn more at raymondjames.com. And Americans for the Arts.
94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:06. Time for KUOW's Week in Review.
Oh, welcome to Friday. Welcome to Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke here. It's so good to be with you now for the next hour when we get to convene and figure out what happened this week and what it all means with our panel of journalists. And this week we've got Q13 news reporter Jennifer Lee. Welcome back. Great to see you.
Thanks so much, Bill. So glad to be here.
So glad to see you in your jewel-toned, as usual, television-ready outfit. You look fantastic. We've got political analyst and columnist Joni Balter here. Joni, great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you.
And we've got KUOW news anchor Paige Browning. Paige, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Bill. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I'm looking, I'm looking east and it's a little cloudy, but I actually got rain. Did anyone else get rained on yesterday?
Actual rain.
Kind of a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Yeah, I like waking up to seeing a little bit of moisture on the ground, knowing that the plants got some water the night before. It's a nice way to go into the weekend. Some calm.
It really was kind of strange, but like I was happy about it. But I was also like, okay, now I have to go out and work in this, but I'm okay with it. Yeah, I think people were still out and about where I was in Puyallup yesterday.
And I'm not going to say that there's fire season is over or anything like that. That would be absurd. But I guess I like to mark when the smoke hasn't been as awful as I thought it was going to be, even if that's only temporary. I'm not a knock on wood person. I like to appreciate the moment and say, that it's been pretty breathable here and I've enjoyed it so far.
Yeah,
should we get into the news?
Yeah. If you're reading about California, I mean, there are parts of California where no one can breathe at all.
Yeah, Tahoe.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking more about, these, what they call season-ending events, meaning the rain event or snow event that's so big that it ends the wildfire season in Washington. So that's sort of I think that'll be my new marker of when we're in the clear.
Season-ending rain. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into what happened this week and what it all means. Thanks for being the Week in Review. We've got, of course, COVID cases in Washington back up to places we haven't seen since January. Obviously, the death rate is much lower thanks to the vaccine, but hospitalizations doubling every 19 days. Our state hospitals officially have no critical care ICU beds available. Jennifer, do we know when vaccine and mask mandates are supposed to make a difference, reduce cases?
Well, I think typically when there are any, additional safety measures or restrictions implemented, it does take a couple weeks at least for us to see the effects of those results. So, I mean, we've even seen that progression starting from early this summer where gradually the state has taken its steps to try and, get these numbers under control. But I don't think that we've actually seen, for example, this indoor mask mandate that just went back into effect. We're really not going to see any of those results for some time. It's really startling because I think we started seeing it probably last month or even, maybe a little before that, just the number of COVID cases that are going up and, testing capacity has also been really strained recently because more people are catching COVID.
So I have this nifty chart that was provided to me by the mayor's office, and it may show that COVID cases have peaked about a week ago, beginning to anyway. And if you sort of map it out the way they do with over 8 weeks, we may have seen the peak, but that's not for hospitalizations. Hospitalizations lag behind because you get sick and then you kind of get sicker and then sick enough to go to the hospital. And also the areas that I'm referring to for peaking would be Seattle and King County.
Yeah. I'll just chime in that it's really difficult to watch sort of this divide that is happening in the state and I guess the nation, that almost all of these cases that are in the hospital are people who did not get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we're seeing get really sick and be hospitalized. And that's who we're seeing in the death toll. And I don't like the divide that is, it's just happening. The more that people are vaccinated, and Delta cases going up in people who are unvaccinated. And I think something that I'm sort of looking for as a person who is vaccinated and fine to wear a mask is I would like some new direction from public health officials. Like, are we supposed to be doing the same things that we did in August 2020, or are there more savvy ways to be out in public? And do they have different advice for people who are not vaccinated? That's sort of what I would like to hear.
Well, you can see the different states do it differently. We mentioned the Washington State's indoor mask mandate started this week. If you're older than 5, you've got to mask up inside. Doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not. There are just a couple of exceptions. If you're working alone, your office is not open to the public, little private gatherings where everybody is vaccinated. But basically, we've got this indoor mandate. But Oregon is now, starting this week, the only state requiring masks outside if you're at an outdoor gathering where people cannot physically distance. Again, regardless of vaccination status. Does anyone think we're going the Oregon route?
Well, folks say that King County is already discussing outdoor masking requirements at crowded places.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have examples, all around the country, like the motorcycle event in South Dakota.
Sturgis Rally.
Where people gathered. I thought that sounded fantastic. You're outside, but it actually, the number of cases multiplied like crazy. And so, think about like the Mariner Stadium. You go there, they're going to ask you to be masked in the indoor, quasi-indoor spaces there. But you could see that if there are concerts or, I don't know, maybe even the upcoming Seahawks game, that it might just be safer to have a mask when you're that close with people in the concession lines, the bathroom, the seat. I could see that happening here as an extra safety measure. Not like when you're, running or walking on the road by yourself necessarily, but in these crowded situations.
I don't think anything is off the table. And I think from some of our health officials in the state and, even from the governor, I don't think they can guarantee that we won't roll back further, because at this point, I think that it's been a gradual dial back in the other direction of adding more restrictions, but hopefully we'll start to see some better results in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and we had our own little mini Sturgis event with the Watershed Music Festival,
right,
which is outdoors. People are camping, and
at the gorge.
At the gorge, like a month ago, a couple hundred cases or more coming from that. And what I'm seeing sort of after that happening is we're really seeing the masking requirements outdoors being led by private entities, by concert hosts, by venues, by bands and performers themselves. So I totally agree. Nothing's going to be off the table at the government level, but a lot of this is happening from companies already.
Right. I don't want to go to the Mariner game and be sitting around maskless people. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not doing that. Several years ago, I would not have predicted such a cultural divide in a time of a national global emergency. You've got the governor in Florida tried to ban local school districts from banning masks. And by the way, a court in Florida just ruled, as we're live here on Friday, that the Governor DeSantis cannot do that Florida school districts are allowed to require students to mask up. But that's Florida, and it's similar fights mostly in the South. And in Washington, local school districts that violate the mask mandate and the vaccine requirement for employees, they can lose state funding. And West Coast states are requiring masks for everybody in school, whether you're vaccinated or not. it's even when in a time when you might think we would pull together, we are so different in this country.
But it's so important who your governor is. I mean, when we vote for these folks, we can't imagine going forward exactly what kind of decisions these folks might have to make, but it so matters. And you also, looking at that judge in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale today, you're saying to yourself, well, thank God we have a judiciary, because you have a governor who was acting in the name of politics and not in the name of public health, which is what this crisis calls for. You have to think about the health of children. They've had, because the vaccine wasn't available all that time to children, and you're sending them off to school. So why wouldn't you come up with something that is the safest possible approach? And so you're so glad to see a judge just get in there and say, no, we're not doing this. That's not how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. I've heard school districts also, advocate on behalf of all of the safety measures they implement. And that in many cases, especially depending on which state or what part of the country you live in, it's some of the most safest places that you could be sending your children, because they daily checks, you have to report your temperature if you're feeling any symptoms. They limit who's able to actually enter the building. There's social distancing, very strict guidelines when it comes to cleaning. So I think that's been a word of reassurance for, I think, a lot of parents who've decided to send their kids to school in person. But with that being said, vaccinated or not, I think all of us probably know someone who knows someone who's also gotten COVID as a breakthrough case, though not as severe.
Well, you mentioned schools saying that they're some of the safest places, except I know that you also know some parents have pulled their kids out. They're going to homeschool their kids. Some of them are going to get together with other parents and figure out how to homeschool. Other parents are calling on districts like Seattle to revive their remote options. I've got two 11-year-olds who are not, can't be vaccinated. They're going to have their masks off as they eat, and it varies from school to school what kind of facilities they have. Some places might be set up to divide kids into smaller groups, eat in classrooms, eat outside, eat under a tent. The ventilation is this or it's that. And a lot of parents are saying, this is not equitable and it's not safe enough.
Yeah. I think it's going to be pretty inconsistent. I think that, you could imagine going to your school and finding out, like you mentioned, ventilation, or how many windows can be open, or, it sounds a little bit like the airplanes, like you're sitting there and you're following all the rules on the airplane, and the person down the aisle decides to eat a meal the entire flight. So their mask was on. This actually happened to me. Their mask was off. I mean, you were supposed to eat, but not for 2 hours. It's supposed to go quick. And so it's going to be so, I think, uneven as we look around. How schools and how ventilation and open windows and tents. But I also think it'll inspire a lot of innovation in that regard, sort of outdoor trips, outdoor classes. Some of that I hope to see.
I think that this whole pandemic has just required innovation. But especially with schools, that's where you see the equity issue come up most starkly, because if a school has the funding through PTA or through the state or whomever to set up tents outside, to have programs for kids, to be in some sort of socially distant setting, that's one thing. But a lot of schools don't have that luxury. And something that schools in particular remind me is that because we don't know when this ends, it's really hard for a school district to plan to really make a strong strategy, because this could change in a month. It could change in 6 months. And I sometimes feel frustrated that we don't have, a really solid model for schooling or for so many things in our life. But the fact is, we just don't know what this is going to develop into.
You're absolutely right. I hate to see when you hear some of the experts saying, well, the new normal, our favorite phrase, could become, we always have some variant of COVID around, and we have to work around it. I mean, what if that is the future? And that's the scenario I find even scarier than Dr. Fauci saying, we won't be out of this until spring of 2022. I mean, maybe we won't be out of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as for this week, I'm getting the impression that maybe home COVID tests are the new toilet paper and disinfectant wipes and an air purifier, because I haven't done that, and school's about to start. And if my kid is the least bit symptomatic, I'm going to want to know whether I ought to give Ginger a bedtime story or not. So
I tried to get a home COVID test the other day.
Yeah.
Went to a local pharmacy, and they said, we just got a shipment this morning and we just sold out of them.
Yep.
Wow.
But
They're not cheap either. I mean, it all adds up for, one test, which you'll probably end up needing more than one if you are a parent with kids and having their concerns.
Yeah.
But the drugstores are offering tests. Some are the rapid ones that are, I don't know which one is more acceptable, or you can arrange for other tests. There's a lot of testing areas around, and it seems like more people are going to them. Like you've just been on a flight, you just went to an event, and you feel not necessarily sick, but you really do wonder, and you don't want to go to the next place and cause those people that, the next place trouble that you didn't really account for unless you took the test.
I wonder if you think that the city will ramp back up the testing sites, because they're getting full again. And as you noted, the store-bought ones are like $20 a pop and sold out. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. Just maybe a few weeks ago, I was talking with the health director over in Whatcom County, and their testing capacity has been really stressed. And they believe it's also added due to travel with, going up to Canada. But yeah, these are all things that families will have to take into consideration, going into the school year this fall. Yeah.
So funny you would mention Canada, because I've heard of some very vaccine resistant people who very much wanted to go to Canada. And so just that rule actually, I think, has increased, not some dramatic number, but has increased the number of people who are willing, if they want to go to Canada, they're getting their vaccination. So, little by little, we're getting our vaccinated numbers up. Seattle and King County are among the best together, make us one of the best metro areas in the country for vaccination rates. I mean, we've done a good job here. You can't get smug, don't get smug, but we've done a good job.
I can be a little smug, can't I?
All right, fine.
Just not too smug. Talking about what different governors and state officials can get away with. Jennifer, I saw that your Q13 colleague, Brandy Cruz, reported on Washington state officials in a couple of agencies trying to limit religious exemptions to the vaccination. So they drafted forms that ask state employees 2 yes or no questions.
The first, you assert that you have a sincerely held religious belief or religious conviction that prevents you from receiving the COVID vaccine.
Okay, if I can pause it right there. If I say I have a religious belief, aren't I saying it's sincere? Do I have to say I have a sincere? Is there such a thing as an insincere religious belief? Okay, but think about that.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, moving on.
The first, you assert that you have a sincerely held religious belief or religious conviction that prevents you from receiving the COVID vaccine. And the second question, you affirm that you have never received a vaccine or medicine from a healthcare provider as an adult. Asked to elaborate on the rationale for the second question, the governor's press secretary told us in a statement, the purpose of this question is to understand whether there was a history of declining medical treatment or vaccination based on an applicant's religious belief. If they answer no, the HR professionals would engage in follow-up questions to better understand the person's history, such as demonstrating changes that they have made as an adult based on those beliefs. We understand people's religious views may change over time.
Okay, so the state would ask follow-up questions to better understand the religious objection. What I can't tell is, does that mean that if you say I have a religious objection to vaccines, but I've taken this other vaccine, or I've taken some other medication, that you actually would be, in a position to lose your job because your religious exemption would be denied? I guess that's not clear yet.
Well, I think the state, as well as, the workers who will have to, enforce and investigate a person's, validity when it comes to exemption, they're really putting themselves in a very tough spot. And it almost feels like it could translate to, the subjective thought of the individual who might be training the person. So I think that they're trying to be black and white, but there's just too much in between, that it's so difficult. And like you were saying, religion, I mean, isn't a belief sincere, like you were saying.
Yeah, if there's gray area in answering those two questions, to me, it seems like that is an open door for legal action for someone who loses their job because they wouldn't get vaccinated, or is forced to get it. And I wonder if the state is saying, okay, you have a religious belief, we get that, but are you not wanting this vaccine because it's so politicized, but you've gotten vaccines in the past? The COVID vaccine is different than measles, mumps, rubella, in the way that people are treating it. It's so polarizing, but wow.
So I called up former Attorney General Rob McKenna today, since people had been interviewing him and quoting him and talking to him about this. And, the employer mandate itself is legal. And he cited a case in Massachusetts, 1905, smallpox, the whole 9 yards here. Yes, you can definitely work on behalf of the public health of your state. That's your job, basically. Where it gets very hairy and less clear about how he can go. There was talk that the governor and some of his advisors had said, keep the religious exemption fairly narrow. And that is where you, in his opinion, where you could get into pretty big trouble. Because you have people going back and saying, well, did you ever believe in vaccines or other medications? I mean, how long? That's where you're pretty deep into people's individual stuff. And that's where the lawsuit possibilities lurk.
Yeah, and I should say I'm no legal expert, but I'm sure people are thinking that way.
I feel like the people that I've talked with who've thus far chosen not to get vaccinated, they have, firm footing in whatever is driving that decision to not be vaccinated. And, there's even been arguments that, once the FDA gives full approval to a vaccine, then I'd be more comfortable going ahead and getting it. But then
which has happened,
has just been approved.
Yeah.
And I'll hear, but no, not that type of a vaccine, the mRNA. I'd only be comfortable with the Johnson & Johnson. So it seems like they'll put out excuses, and, people have legitimate reasons why they can't, for example, the medical exemptions. But all in all, just to say, I think people who have not gotten a vaccine and are not planning on it, I'm not sure that something like this is making it very narrow will make a difference.
Well, so clearly what is driving the Delta variant are unvaccinated people. I mean, we have science that proves that. And I'm all good with, respecting people's religious and medical concerns about the vaccine. But where it gets a little difficult, a little more difficult to accept, is when people spout information that's just plain flat wrong. Like my own cousin, I love him dearly, but he couldn't go to a family event, he told me, because he starts in on it's the blood type. I'm like, no, it's not about the blood type. But he believed, and he's so sincere, and he's such a good guy. Somebody told him this. So I really, I mean, it should have to be based, in my mind, on facts and truth and real science, not just I heard the 15 people removed, that it comes down to your blood type, which, hello, it does not.
Yeah, I just an anecdote of that. I've noticed that in a few friend circles, this has sort of become like the untouchable topic, the elephant in the room, that there's a family member who doesn't want to be vaccinated, and you just don't talk about it anymore, or the family can't get together, where you just look past it because it has become so polarizing. But the requirements to get vaccinated to keep your job, that could change things by how many weeks are we from August 18th? That's when the requirement goes
October
into effect. Oh, that's what I mean, October 18th. So maybe that'll change by then.
And don't forget, you have to get started because the one shot
Right.
has to be, 3 weeks to 4 weeks separate from the other.
Mhm.
Well, the cancellation of that family gathering is kind of the answer itself, that no one's forcing you to get vaccinated. I'll see you later. I don't know when, but it's not safe yet. So you can, I'll talk to you on Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep on rolling here with Weekend Review. We've been discussing, of course, all the COVID developments of the week, and the next week we've got school opening up in Seattle and many other places. Should be very interesting. We're talking here with Paige Browning, KUOW news anchor, and political analyst and columnist Joni Balter, and Q13 news reporter Jennifer Lee. You can hear them. You can even see them if you're on Facebook or YouTube, because we're live streaming the show in our little rectangles here that you can find by searching for KUOW Public Radio. And we'll continue figuring out what happened this week and what it means in just a moment, so don't go away.
We're living in busy and interesting times. So busy, maybe you missed some of the things that are going on.
That is the first time we've ever done that in the atmosphere of another planet. NASA is calling it a Wright brothers moment, and that's what it is, a real first.
Hi, I'm Patricia Murphy, host of KUOW's Daily News podcast. Make us part of your routine by listening to Seattle Now, first thing in the morning, wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for KUOW comes from Taco Time, family-owned with a focus on locally sourced ingredients and compostable packaging. With 79 locations around the Puget Sound, online ordering is available at tacotimenw.com and on the Taco Time Northwest app.
64 degrees in Seattle. Still a slight chance of showers early this afternoon, but beyond that, our forecast for today has been upgraded from partly sunny to mostly sunny. It's 12:34. This is KUOW 94.9 Seattle, and this is KUOW's Week in Review.
Bill Radke here, continuing on the Week in Review, and Jennifer Lee at Q13, you've been reporting this week on Afghan refugees coming to Washington State. What have you learned?
Yeah, first of all, we are welcoming in people nearly every single day. And I'm sure just as, the days progress with this mass evacuation happening, we're going to keep getting more people. There are several agencies locally that are working on resettling refugee families who are coming in. And first of all, we live in an area where housing is very difficult, even for people who, live here and are, have stable jobs and aren't going through such a life-changing crisis. So they're really reaching out to the community for help. Or organizations, for example, like Afghan Health Initiative, which was created by current and former refugees, they're opening up their doors, and so are community members. So it's definitely very big work that is happening on a day-to-day basis right now.
Yeah, and it seems to me like, okay, the first phase was evacuating people who were in danger or in trouble or wanted to leave Afghanistan. And now it's finding a home for them in a place that's pretty crunched on housing. But to me, I see that this next phase is going to be so much about our government and our local agencies, like you said, the Afghan Health Initiative, setting people up for success here. And I think that a lot of that is going to come down to community members. The refugees that are coming here, they need housing, they need supplies, they need beds, lamps. They are coming with virtually nothing. And so I think a lot will come down to the community helping to welcome them, and not just with physical things, but with actually bringing them into the community, meeting people and giving them a group, giving them a support group. And making them real residents.
To that point, Paige, KUOW interviewed the head of the International Rescue Committee in Washington State. They've resettled 40 Afghans in the last 3 weeks, many more to come. Nikki Smith has been working with refugees for 30 years and says what's happening now is unprecedented. Families that are arriving are far more traumatized than she's ever witnessed. They've had to leave their families suddenly, knowing their families are in danger. You mentioned the housing shortage. Temporary housing is expensive and makes it hard to rebuild your life, hard to get your kids enrolled in schools, get a job, et cetera. They're talking with hotels. As you said, they need gift cards, furniture, money, cash, and people who haven't gone through the whole bureaucratic screening process are not eligible for help like food stamps, which is tough. So they also need interpreters and even more.
They need a sense of community. They need work. They need stable housing. They need that sense of safety that has been missing for their lives, not just in the past weeks, but years. This is one of the reasons why they had to leave their country and come to the United States, is that they were targeted.
Joni, they don't just fly from Kabul to SeaTac Airport either. It's
not directly. It's a lot more complicated. So some of these folks, they largely come into Dulles Airport in DC. They're sent to some of the military bases like Fort Lee, which is in Virginia, and then Texas. It takes a while. It takes a while for them to get here. Now, you probably know that Washington has a tradition of welcoming refugees. This goes back many, many years to Governor Dan Evans and Ralph Monroe, who was an assistant to Governor Evans and then also became Secretary of State Ralph Monroe. Washington, it's sort of in our blood to be welcoming at this time. But, Seattle itself and Bellevue, Puget Sound area is, does have a housing shortage, has expensive housing. The biggest Afghan population in the country is in Fremont, California. And so you'd think that, through their personal connections or family connections, that's the way a lot of that works, where they specify where they might like to go. From what I'm hearing, they're actually not sending a lot of folks to California for the same reason, the housing shortage there as well. So if the folks who are coming here, you might end up seeing them not so much in the urban core, but more far-flung communities, which makes a lot of sense. So for here, we have this, it's more complicated now than it was then because of our large homeless population also putting pressure on housing and resources.
Yeah. World Relief Seattle is based in South King County, and they're one of the resettlement agencies working with Afghan refugees. And they've even said they've gotten so many offers, but for example, housing a family in Bainbridge Island doesn't totally make sense because they need to seek out services, make those medical appointments near their offices in Kent. But, it's also heartwarming to see large corporations like Airbnb committing to 1,000 homes across the country and around the world. But, going back to your point, Joni, there is a man, the executive director of Afghan Health Initiative, Naveed Hamidi. His sister was able to escape out of a flight last week from Afghanistan, ended up in Germany, and she'll be applying for P2 refugee status. But he said from Germany, she'll probably have to wait a year, 2 years for that to go.
Wow.
Unless there's some sort of expedited process, which a lot of people are fighting for right now.
Yeah, it's time consuming. It really is to process all this. The goal is to get as many people out as you can. What do they have? Flights every 45 minutes if they're able to continue those. That's the upbeat side of this. There's also a political side, and there does seem to be a narrative here that you could say that Joe Biden messed up. Joe Biden's numbers have dropped something like 8% in the Real Clear Politics job approval category from 55 to 47. But I sort of hate with 3 H's, so that'd be hate. The way that this is being portrayed is if, Joe Biden, there was this picture of him, he was asked a question about how things were going, and he sort of put his head down and he onto his hands. And that was supposed to be the iconic image of this, this moment of sort of exasperation and the defeat. And just, that isn't the way to do this. Republicans are waiting to kind of make this their issue, I guess, in 2022.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little cheesy.
And I wonder, what success looks like here forward. What does it look like for us to successfully welcome how many hundreds or thousands of refugees come to Washington State? Governor Inslee and state political leaders in both major parties, they are outspoken about wanting to welcome people here and that it's sort of part of Washington. It's in our blood. Inslee said, we've welcomed 150,000 refugees since like the 70s. So, politicians are out there saying, this is who we are as Washingtonians. And I'll be curious to see, what the success storyline looks like. Once they get here, it has to be that we have built community for them, not just offered them a flight and a bed.
Jennifer, have you been talking with Afghan, veterans of the Afghanistan war here locally?
Not just this week, not of the war in Afghanistan, but people who've certainly served throughout this 20-year period and have made stops over to Iraq. And of course, everyone is heartbroken, and it's almost unbelievable to hear about the attacks in Kabul at Abbey. But there's also outrage. They're angry. And I think it kind of goes back to, the fact that, this is becoming political about, who do we blame? But there is a very clear sense of people, including military veterans, the ones that I spoke with, who believe that this was mishandled. It was kind of a rush out situation. Why weren't there more resources and support available? But I mean, I think what's happening in Afghanistan, do they have another option to offer at this point while also kind of pointing the finger? No. And I think we just need to wait and see how the rest of this mission carries through, especially with the high alert that is still ongoing there.
And I don't know if you saw these two U.S. representatives who flew into Kabul this week, and President Biden was very unhappy with this, but it was one Democrat, one Republican veterans, and they said, we need to see this from the ground. And they went to Kabul and came back and said, we didn't think this was the right time to pull out, and seeing it from the ground, we now know that this is the only step forward. That was what their conclusion was. Yeah.
The American people in polls get it, that, the longer, it wasn't going to change anything if we stayed longer. The only thing I'd say to those two politicians is those are two seats that other people could have had. But I guess the information, happy to have, we always need more information, right? So, okay. Yeah. But I think, the American people are sort of sophisticated in how they view this. They're not saying, oh, if only we could have stayed longer and watched how the military there would handle this. They're saying we had to go. The time is now.
For sure.
So do we expect any more, wrapping up this topic, do we expect any milestones, any conflicts over Washington State resettlement? You've mentioned, where folks are going to go. Maybe they won't go in urban centers. You talked about the politics of this. So far, I have also heard, a bipartisan welcoming of refugees. But do you expect it to stay that uncontroversial? Any more thoughts on what happens next in Washington State?
Well, I think because the tradition is so established here, that it's likely to tamp down some of that. There's an opposition to everything, to getting up in the morning. But I think the fact that it had broad Republican and Democratic support all these many years, the idea of transforming refugees who helped us and deserve to be helped in this time, I think that reduces the likelihood of big, broad scale opposition to it.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, for anyone who, does have thoughts about providing housing or, providing supplies. These organizations, you could go directly to them or ship it to them if you have supplies. With housing, you have to apply. It's not just you sign up and people will show up at your door. There's a vetting process, background checks. So just keep that in mind that you have to fill out an application.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Figure out what you can do to help. There's something for almost everybody. Okay. That's Jennifer Lee, news reporter at Q13. And we've got political analyst Joni Balter with us and KUOW news anchor Paige Browning. We are reviewing the week with you because it is the week in review. It's right there in the name of the program. And that's what we do. And we're going to keep on doing it. You can watch the show on YouTube or Facebook. Just search for KUOW Public Radio. And you can see us do the show as well. We're going to take a very short break and be right back, so don't go away.
Carter Subaru supports KUOW's car donation program.
Hi, I'm Kim Malcolm, local host of KUOW's All Things Considered. If you're thinking about supporting KUOW's news coverage, consider donating a vehicle you no longer use. We'll arrange to have it picked up and then invest the money into supporting the news you rely on. Get started today at 1-866-KUOW-CAR.
The KUOW car donation program is powered by Carter Subaru in Ballard, Shoreline, and at cartersubaru.com.
It is 12:48. Stay with us into the 1 o'clock hour for BBC NewsHour, a roundup of news from all around the globe. That's just a few minutes away in the big scheme of things. Currently 63 degrees in Seattle. We are expecting sun this afternoon and a high of 69. This is 94.9 KUOW, and it's KUOW's Week in Review.
Hi, Bill Radke here. This week, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan said the city will spend $7.5 million in federal COVID recovery funding to help neighborhoods tackle their most pressing needs and to revitalize local businesses. KUOW's Paige Browning, can you tell us a little more about what this money is going to go toward?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, this money is going to go right into community groups. I think it's 28 different community groups spanning all across Seattle. And the money basically goes to whatever the neighborhood deems necessary to revitalize their area, specifically things like graffiti removal, tools to create community events, community spaces, some money for safety improvements, and tools to build up e-commerce capacity, whatever that means, but basically just money that the neighborhoods say would help their neighborhood get back on its feet.
So I think the whole thing is that the city does not want to do COVID part 2, like where all the businesses shut down, hundreds of them, where downtown feels like, the moon or something like that. And, they've been working so hard to bring people back. It's three-legged stools, the way someone explained it. You have your tourists, your office workers, and your residents. And actually, through the summer, everything outdoors and everything like that, and a sense that COVID was leaving there for a while, the tourists and the residents coming back, that is doing pretty well, actually. So for hotel occupancy, a few weeks ago, not perfect, but 70%, which is better than certainly last year. In the last week, dropped to 66%, so not serious there, but residents coming back. Office workers is the hiccup, with 24% occupancy in a lot of empty buildings, and that does affect many of the small businesses. I wrote a piece for Bloomberg Opinion recently about sort of the competition between the tech companies and how will they handle return to work. And at that time, Amazon, and this was good for downtown, was going to bring everybody back starting in September. Well, as you know, they changed that to January.
That came and went.
That came and went. And so that is probably the sort of toughest part of it. There is also, and you can't skip this, there's an overlay of the homelessness and public safety issues that are really troubling a lot of downtown and sort of downtown broad, like Queen Anne. I interviewed the owner of the Uptown Espresso on Lower Queen Anne, and he closing down. And why? It has to do, he said, when I spoke with him, that that some of the homeless folks are treating the front entry and actually the business itself as a bathroom. He feels that Lower Queen Queen Anne has actually declined quite a bit as a neighborhood.
So did this Uptown Espresso owner, I don't suppose he or she talked about whether this congressional fund, it's like this week we get $7.5 million. Is that, would money have helped the problem?
Yeah, because he did mention, look, the rent is very high. The regular customers are less inclined to come in there if they don't feel safe. He mentioned some, sort of snatch and grab of the tip jars, making it, just there's many Uptown Espressos. This one is the worst, just for its proximity to, I guess, to some homeless camps and hotels. And so he just felt it wasn't a going concern. So if somebody wants to run over there, no, I don't work for him, and sort of talk him back into it, maybe. I didn't connect the two.
Mm-hmm. I do love their drinks with the foam on top, and I
velvety foam, and there was a commercial.
Exactly. Yes. But our station, and I'm still kind of hybrid, so I'm not going into my station physically every day, and I'm maybe in the field anyway, but our station is fairly close to that lower Queen Anne area. And I mean, even right as the pandemic was setting in early 2020, when we've had to do live shots out there at night, it's one of those places where I'd be like, well, we'll see how it goes. And if it's uncomfortable, then we'll get out of there. So I definitely seen that myself, just being nearby that area. But it's not only there. I think there are many other parts of Seattle that, if you want to use the word suffered, and obviously we all know that the homelessness issue has only ballooned. And one of the topics to go along with this is, there's this big question of how safety around the courthouse, the King Courthouse, is going to come back. And, we just did a follow-up a couple days ago, and my photographer, Mike McCarty, went out there to get video, and he showed me his video after. There's fencing all around City Hall Park now. But I mean, there was literally a man shaking the fence, trying to get back into the park. And I think the fear right now is moving forward, when it's all cleaned up again, once the city of Seattle takes care of it, whatever it needs to do, by October when it reopens, is it going to revert back to what it was? And how are we going to prevent it from happening?
The city's putting some money in there, but I have to say City Hall Park is one of the embarrassments of the city. It's a challenge to democracy. If you can't have your jurors and your county employees come to work there and feel safe, I mean, you can't have trials. Government doesn't work. I mean, how embarrassing, everybody. That's just, off the charts here. That has to be handled better than it is now.
Yeah. I think this is a major issue for the city and the county. And I think it'll be interesting to see if the county acquires City Hall Park, which County Council Member Jean Colwells wants to do, and they want to do something different with it. But, the fact is, this is an area of downtown that's seen sort of constant crime reports come in for the past few years. And the solutions that I've heard so far basically amount to, we're going to close it down and not have it be this park anymore, or we're going to put something else here, which, okay, fine, maybe that solves the park solution, but that doesn't, to me, seem like it's changing the root of the problems. People who are living there, they need to live somewhere. So I guess I would like to see a holistic response to the sort of smattering of problems that are happening at that intersection of downtown.
Yeah, I mean, what a slap for the county to say, okay, you guys clearly can't handle it, so we'll just take it over because you can't do it. That's what they're saying.
And Jean Colwells, I believe one of her ideas is to put housing there. So then we're losing green space, but getting housing, which we are in dire need of.
And
when are we going to hear something next on that? Does anyone know what's the next sort of deadline on City Hall Park?
As far as I know,
I don't know myself.
Yeah, as far as I know, I've heard it could be as soon as 6 weeks that the park reopens. And the council, because owned by the city of Seattle, they're just working very closely with city officials about that plan. And obviously there's ongoing conversations about, SPD, but obviously we know their numbers are really low, but that having law enforcement presence helps deter crime, no brainer. And I think there was just mutual conversations that everyone felt that if they could bring back more of a positive vibe within the park, even if it's something like food trucks or, making it more of an extension space of the courthouse, that could help. But
we know you can repurpose these parks because we saw it with Occidental Park. They brought in, I don't know, the ping pong tables and stuff like that. And they created a different use of the park, and you can do that. Some of that was applied at Westlake. This place has been a problem for so long. To me, it's just wild that we had these judges writing letters for over a year saying, we're not even comfortable going there. We're the one that rule on whether these people, what their next steps are, but we're not even comfortable going there.
You're listening to Week in Review. We've been telling you what happened this week, what it all means, and we're right at the end of the show here, which means we just have time to hand you something to smile about, because the news is not always smile worthy. My quick thing is that we did KUOW's John Ryan did a story about state officials vacuuming up a hornet's nest, an Asian giant hornet nest.
Yes.
And he never used the term murder hornet, which I personally appreciate. I know everybody's got a different approach. Some people say, well, we got to tell them because we're talking about the murder hornets, so called, because that's what people call them. So,
yeah.
But in Japan, the hornets do kill up to 50 people a year, and they don't even call them murder hornets there.
My gosh.
Dogs kill 25,000 people a year. So if we're did you know that?
No,
not in Japan, but I mean in general. So we don't call them murder dogs, and we don't call them. They decapitate honeybees and feed them to their young.
They are pretty rough on the honeybees,
Yeah.
But listen, if feeding bugs to your young is murder, then we have to call them murder robins and murder sparrows. I'm personally happy to see the term murder hornet.
You want to
rebrand? That made me smile. I want to rebrand. And Paige, you said you're loving on the Storm.
Oh yeah, this is. I can get on my Seattle Storm soapbox. I mean, I can't stop thinking about the Seattle Storm visiting the White House. Sue Bird, Jewel Lloyd, Breonna Stewart wearing the best outfit I've seen in a long time. So if you haven't seen it, go look it up to smile. She has a blazer, matching pants. Tom Brown matching, the pants are Tom Brown, a skirt over the top, Pumas, who's a sponsor of hers. It's just so good. She's doing fashion, she's doing politics, she's the MVP, and I just got so much joy of watching women's sports celebrated.
And we're out of time. Smile at that. Thank you so much, Paige Browning, KUOW news anchor and political analyst, contributing columnist Joni Balter, Q13 reporter Jennifer Lee. It's been great spending an hour with you, and we would love to do it again soon on the Week in Review. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Great to have you with us. Thank you to Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu for social media and live streaming support. And thank you to Alec Cowan for producing this week's show. I'm Bill